Hello and welcome to Business Reporter's IoT for Business campaign. I'm Alistair Greener. Many companies that massively deploy IoT sensors, such as to track the location of thousands of their assets, often overlook necessary quality checks and fail to cope with their own growth. Due to the hidden and often neglected challenges of deploying projects and the growing urge for knowledge of IoT and LoRaWAN technology, we wanted to offer some simple answers to questions you might have asked yourself. What are the main issues when deploying an IoT project? How do you avoid risks when scaling up? For that, we turned to Actility, a founding member of the LoRa Alliance, the fastest growing technology alliance in the world, with more than 500 members. Actility is at the forefront of industrial IoT connectivity development, with major large-scale project deliveries. Providing advanced technology to deploy and operate public and private wireless IoT networks, Actility is connecting millions of devices with hundreds of companies, using its platform all over the world. Joining us today to provide a leading insight into this is Olivier Ausson, CEO of Actility. Good morning, Olivier. Why are so many businesses setting themselves up for failure? I mean, what role does the IoT network play in all of this?
I would say usually the number one issue is lack of coherence in execution. When you ask a CEO or project manager in IoT, is that a very important project? They say yes. Is it going to impact your entire organization? They say yes. Is it going to impact it for the next 10 years to come? They say yes. And then you're asking who is handling the proof of concept for IoT? And they say, oh, we have intern next door. That's the discrepancy. If IoT is really as serious as most enterprises say it is, then they need to handle it very seriously, to think through everything that needs to happen for their IoT project to scale. Otherwise, it's better not to start.
What are the consequences of projects aborting at an early stage?
Well, there can be two situations. Either you don't stop on time, and you end up having maybe 1 million water meters deployed that you will need to reboot and restart one by one, and you can imagine the size, the magnitude of the disaster. Usually it stops before that. It stops after the sort of first management demo, and then you scale to a few hundred devices and things start to go wrong. And the CEO concludes, IoT is not mature, let's close the subject and maybe we'll reopen in 5 years. And that's a big problem too, because for these 5 years, your organization will not benefit from the organizational gains, efficiency gains that IoT is bringing. So that's the two types of failure that we tend to see in the field.
To what extent do companies underestimate the impact of scalability, when setting up a project? Can you perhaps give us an example?
So let's start again at the typical situation where you put a half-time engineer or a student in a lab in perfect conditions with just a few devices. What's wrong there? If your project is going to have to scale, you need to test not the best conditions, but the worst conditions. So you need to think first, my water meter is going to be located in the basement, in the worst part of the house. And then you're not going to have just one, you're going to have millions. So you need to test extreme densities of devices to check the situation where it collides, where everything is not clean. And this is the only way that you can check that the infrastructure provider you selected is actually able to handle these complex situations. And if your POC survives this, then you're ready to scale. So that's the typical checkpoints. Then once you're done with this, an experienced partner will bring you additional painful questions like, how do you upgrade your networks? Yeah, you have 1 million devices, now you need to upgrade it. How do you do it? What are the strategies to do it? Or you just had a massive electrical failure in the country. How does your network recover from the massive amount of data that's coming? So that's where experienced partners can really help in driving such IoT projects to tackle the difficult questions up front.
How should companies characterize a system that's likely to scale? I mean, what should be their checkpoints?
So their checkpoints should be, as we just described, really on the stability of the network. How often does the device fail? How often can it communicate or cannot? And then all the change management, around upgrades, around exceptional situations, around disaster recovery. How do you do geographical redundancy if your main data center is going down? All these sorts of questions. So it should be problem driven. It should be starting with a precise list of all the problems that are likely to happen. I'm focusing on the technical, but it can also be organizational or human. And then one by one, you will describe exactly how this problem is being solved. So it needs to be problem driven as opposed to just nice demo type of quick project.
Everything is going to the cloud. Is that the case for IoT? I mean, are people comfortable having all their items managed by the cloud?
So that, of course, varies with customers. There is a very strong drive nowadays to bring everything to the cloud. It's very convenient, very easy. However, particularly in the industrial IoT, people are also very concerned if IoT is used as a critical infrastructure, that it should always work, and it should also work when you have problems with your internet connectivity. Therefore, in some segments, and particularly in the industry, there is a need of what they call edge processing or edge local IoT networks to make sure that the operations, the day-to-day operations, will not depend on any external factor or third party. So cloud does not answer 100% of the IoT use cases.
Where does Actility fit into this picture? Do you cover cloud and local solutions?
We have a mixture of customers that focus on cloud and customers that focus on local, and really both. For retail customers that have hundreds of sites, typically they will focus on hosted. There are very successful hosted LoRaWAN network providers worldwide, Comcast in the US, Orange in France, Swisscom. So this is a very successful segment. There we try to help customers to integrate seamlessly with the leading IoT clouds, the leading platforms such as Microsoft Azure IoT or AWS IoT or ThingWorx. We bring connectors that allow these companies to use the data immediately as soon as it's produced by the sensors. In the industrial IoT world, our customers tend to focus on on-premise. Here we have a specific solution segment called ThinkPark Enterprise that covers installation in single sites. They can also cover several sites. Typically in a supply chain, you may want to cover the warehouses of your supplier all the way to your own warehouses. And you need to interconnect them. So we also built an interconnect hub called ThinkPark Enterprise that can connect private enterprises together, but also interconnect with public networks and also satellite networks. So it's really a mixture, and one of our strengths is to provide really this ability to serve very diverse use cases in a mix and match.
Now, companies look for trust and experience. How do you get to build your experience?
Well, obviously, there is no shortcut, there is no compression algorithm for experience. So you just have to have experience. We've been around for 10 years with about 100 engineers working around the globe on every continent. Use case after use case, we met issues, we met unexpected issues, and we solved them. So obviously, this was the main way that we built our experience. Also, we always drive innovation, and we push the first standards, the new standards, the new options of the standards to customers very, very quickly, so we can build experience first. So that's really the main way that we built our experience, and we bring it to customers.
And what does that experience provide for your customers?
So we've been there for over 10 years with 100 engineers serving hundreds, thousands of customers all over the world. That gave us a lot of experience. Obviously, all the issues related to scaling, to introducing the technology to new use cases and new countries, we've faced that. I would stress also the fact that we have been through several live network upgrades, hundreds of them, with millions of devices, And this is important because this is probably the single most difficult part of IoT deployment. How do you upgrade your network once you have millions of devices on it? And I would also point that we are now having over 120% year-over-year growth over our customers' networks. So we already experience every day very, very high growth on operational networks. And we have proven that we can manage this with business continuity.
If a company has set up a system without the quality checks in place and fails, how easy would it be to move to your system?
So there are really two situations in the IoT world. Either you build a system without really considering standards, and there you are in deep trouble because whatever you built will not be something you can migrate to anything, or you have built the network on standards. And today there are very, very strong standards that are horizontal. You can build pretty much any IoT use case on top of them. LoRaWAN is probably the strongest ecosystem today, with about 500 companies collaborating around this standard. So in that case, if you take LoRaWAN, migrations are quite easy because if you switch the central system, the devices will automatically reconnect to that other system. And at least you can preserve the entire investment you made in sensors, but also installing them, that can be preserved across a migration.
Could you maybe give us a case study of a client that you helped make the shift and the benefits that they experienced?
Well, in terms of migration, remember a customer, we had a hospital that had a very massive RFID project, typically many devices, many collisions, and they started the project with open source on a relatively low budget, and they were in a failure situation, about 60% success rate only, very high power consumption of devices. So this was heading for failure. We've been able to migrate all these devices to our system, and now they experience close to 100% connectivity success rate and also decreased power consumption of the devices. So that didn't come by magic. It's because we've been working for over 10 years on complex radio optimization algorithms. But really, we have use cases across the board. We've migrated water metering projects from proprietary protocols to LoRaWAN, millions of meters very successfully. I would say today the most successful category of projects we have is geolocation. New IoT technologies, such as the technologies provided by our subsidiary Abiway, they can do indoor and outdoor tracking. This is really new. And we've had, for example, Bouygues Construction, one of the main construction groups worldwide, tracking over 20,000 tools with these systems. We have KPN that is tracking hundreds of thousands of bikes in Holland. We have Volvo or Mercedes that are tracking trucks on parkings. So really lots of very successful projects that focus on, I would say, campus geolocation. Not all over the world, but really within your campus, within your parking, within your construction area. Track objects, track assets, and track workers. Accenture is also extremely successful in the oil and gas sector around worker safety and equipping workers with tracking so that whenever they have a problem, you can go and rescue them. So really a lot of experience worldwide with many diverse use cases.
Based on everything we've talked about today, what do you predict for the future? How will you position yourself with 5G coming? I mean, should customers be waiting for 5G?
5G is very confusing for most customers because 5G is supposed to do everything, so you just wait until it does everything. That's not the case. 5G is really bringing a lot of innovation in high bandwidth, local area networks, TV broadcasting. It is not bringing really any significant innovation in low bitrate, low power, or IoT. It really only recycles what you get today in cellular with technologies such as LTE-M or narrowband IoT. And of course, when we built LoRaWAN, we had this in mind. And therefore, we built LoRaWAN with a very specific segment focusing on private networks, which cannot be served by cellular networks, and also focusing on ultra low power. Today, we're able to achieve 10 to 20 times lower energy budgets than cellular technologies, and that's going to be preserved as cellular networks migrate to 5G. So I would say, look at LoRaWAN as the sort of Wi-Fi of IoT. It's serving specific segment, ultra low power, private networks, and it's really the best technology to address these networks. It will coexist with cellular, and in most use cases you will need some devices using cellular and some devices using LoRaWAN, the Wi-Fi of IoT.
That was Olivier Elson, CEO of Actility.